supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. The second is covered under the Fifth Amendment of the Bill of Rights, which states in its entirety, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless upon a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land and naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger, shall not put any person to be subject to the same offense twice, to be put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for private use without just compensation. The third is laid out in the 14th Amendment, which declares, less than Section 2, which is not at present necessary for this discussion, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of its laws. It has to be understood by all American citizens that to suspend these three fundamental rights is to, in essence, remove all other rights that the U.S. Constitution grants. Were these rights to be suspended for the whole of the population, all power would belong to the authorities and create a police state where one could be subjected to all manner of laws, which could include curfews, stop and search for no cause, laws which subject people to arrest for speaking out against the government, and laws that determine what the press can print and what it cannot. It would be dangerous for anyone to proclaim that the Bill of Rights contained in the Constitution is somehow protection against the creation of a police state in this country. It would be folly to contend that because one does not commit crimes that one is somehow immune to the aftermath of a suspension of the Bill of Rights. Often these beliefs are born of a failure to understand how these rights actually protect each individual, while at the same time protect the nation as a whole. While there will be a discussion on these subjects of habeas corpus in the Sedition Acts of 1798 and 1918 later in these treatises, it becomes necessary to briefly discuss how these acts came into being and what the effect on freedom could be if these acts were ever implemented and sustained again in the U.S. Firstly, a discussion of the habeas corpus is in order so that the impact of the Sedition Acts can be fully understood. In general, habeas corpus is the right of the individual to be informed of what charges, if any, have been brought against him. When there's a suspension of habeas corpus, the individual no longer has the right to that information, and an oppressive government, if it desired, could imprison an individual indefinitely without cause. This would mean, as we have seen with some of the jailing which has occurred with terrorism suspects, that one's very association with an individual of questionable character could be construed as providing certain comforts to the defined enemy, and that individual would experience not just the loss of rights, but of freedom in general. The Sedition Acts of 1798 and 1918 were enacted in order to forbid individuals and groups from speaking out, as well as acting out against the United States government. During times of what may be purported to be times of crisis, national crisis, the government often reserves the right to, in essence, keep the people from questioning the motives and actions of those who are in power. As has been seen in the last few years, it is not even necessary to invoke a specific act in order to remove those freedoms which are guaranteed in the United States Constitution. A couple of years after the beginning of the Iraq War, Vice President Dick Cheney was in a shopping mall in Eagle County, Colorado, and was approached by Steve Howards and his 7-year-old boy. Howard declared that he found Cheney's policies on Iraq to be reprehensible. He was arrested 10 minutes later by the Secret Service, initially for assault on the Vice President. The agent later requested that a charge of harassment be filed, but the Eagle County District Attorney's Office refused and dismissed the charges. While the charge was not carried out, the man still lost his personal freedom for a period of time simply for something that he said to one of the nation's leaders. This action by the government constitutes the very fabric of what the Sedition Acts were about. Speak out against the government in a time of crisis and one could potentially lose one's freedom. But if a single individual can lose their personal freedom because a government entity does not like something that one has said, does this constitute a loss of freedom on the entire populace? There is evidence that suggests that the answer to this question is affirmative. When a government is permitted, either by law, by design, or by the will of the populace, to remove the personal freedoms from the few, it is then has the ability and the precedent to remove freedom from the masses. As the passing into law as a tool for protecting the freedoms of the United States, several unnoticed laws became a permanent part of the laws of the land. Every single one of those laws punched holes in the Fourth Amendment, but very few people cared initially. The only person to object to the attack on the Constitution was Senator Russ Feingold, who made this statement on the floor of the Senate on October 11, 2001. There is no doubt that if we lived in a police state, it would be easier to catch terrorists. If we lived in a country where the police were allowed to search your home at any time for any reason, if we lived in a country where the government is entitled to open your mail, eavesdrop on your phone conversations, or intercept our email communications, if we lived in a country where people could be held in jail indefinitely based on what they write or think, or based on mere suspicion that they are up to no good, the government would probably discover and arrest more terrorists or would-be terrorists, just as it would find more lawbreakers generally. But that wouldn't be a country in which we would want to live. And it wouldn't be a country for which we could